Across Latin America and the Caribbean, cities are growing at extraordinary speed. Today, 4 out of every 5 people in the region live in urban areas, making it the most urbanized developing region in the world. For millions of families, opportunity depends on whether their city works, whether children can reach good schools, families can access healthcare, and everyday life becomes safer, healthier, and more connected. Since 1976, the OPEC Fund has invested $3.4 billion across the region, supporting infrastructure, services, and financing that improve daily life and strengthen long-term development. In El Salvador, a $70 million loan to the Surf City 2 program is turning the La Libertad coastal corridor into a premier tourism hub, strengthening infrastructure and climate resilience for 125,000 residents.
La parte de las ventas de habitaciones y todo eso era era un tanto considerable, pero ya cuando vino este proyecto, incluso con los torneos de surf y todo eso, que se ha dado a conocer más el país, es que ha venido un flujo más de extranjeros que le ha despertado bastante la curiosidad de cómo se está moviendo ahora El Salvador después de ser el país más peligroso del mundo.
Elsewhere, small entrepreneurs and farmers still struggle to access affordable financing. To help close that gap, the OPEC Fund is working with Sudameris Bank in Paraguay to expand lending for small businesses, women-led enterprises, and agribusinesses.
Estábamos en un local arrendado. El espacio físico era un espacio limitado. Ya con el crecimiento y la evolución que tuvo la empresa a lo largo de los años anteriores, hizo ya que realmente el espacio sea una limitante muy importante para el crecimiento. Entonces, bueno, ahora con la nueva planta es ya otra la situación y otra la oportunidad que tenemos para hacer avanzar, ¿verdad?
Desde todo punto de vista tenemos un ahorro en cuanto a energía eléctrica, tenemos un ahorro en cuanto a usos naturales que impactan directamente en la calidad del producto y obtenemos mejores resultados y por ello más ganancias.
Because when local businesses grow, families gain stability and communities become more resilient. Behind every investment is a person striving for something better, a business owner creating jobs, a parent building security for their family, a young person imagining new possibilities. Across Latin America and the Caribbean, cities are becoming engines not only of growth, but of human potential. And the OPEC Fund remains committed to helping that potential thrive.
Good morning, Excellencies, dear ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to this parallel session number 2 on unlocking human potential. I'm Melinda Crane. I'm an independent journalist with a background in political economy and law, and it is a great honor to accompany you today as moderator. As we were reminded during the opening plenary, urban centers are absolutely crucial for translating development ambitions into measurable improvements in people's lives, which is why this session is entitled Cities of Opportunity. And as we just saw, in Latin America and the Caribbean, cities are already driving growth and social mobility with significant gains for some. The question that we'll be asking here today is how we can make them engines of opportunity for most. And as we heard, we are talking about one of the most urbanized regions in the world, and that concentration of people, economic activity, and talent clearly is a tremendous asset. At the same time, it means that urban systems must deliver for expanding populations that include vulnerable groups that without those services will not have access to economic and social life. This session is about how we unlock their potential. We'll explore the challenges that policymakers face, also in confronting systemic budgetary pressures and demographic challenges, and we'll spotlight solutions, the financial instruments, the partnerships, and the configurations institutionally that can, in fact, translate into lasting urban opportunities. We have an absolutely exceptional group of speakers with us. It's my pleasure to greet them here. It's also my pleasure to greet President Al Khalifa. It's wonderful that you have joined us for the beginning of our session. Thank you so much also for getting us off to a great start this morning. We begin with a keynote from Ilan Goldfein. He is president of the Inter-American Development Bank, former director of the IMF's Western Hemisphere Division, and former governor of the Banco Central do Brasil. At IDB, he sharpened the focus on inclusive growth, private sector mobilization, and the social infrastructure that underpins long-term development, including in cities, and he introduced a pioneering 5-year pilot program for cities and regions that's providing a financing line of up to $1 billion, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that from him now. Welcome, Dr. Goldfein. It's an honor to have you with us. The floor is yours.
So, Melinda, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here on the Cities of Opportunities, Unlocking Human Potential. Thank you for the President of OPEC Fund to being here in person for this very important session, and for the panelists, the Minister from Suriname, Wiedemann, Deputy Secretary Viviani, our friend Danielle Best, and everybody else that is participating here with us, and of course our own partner from the private sector of South America. So thank you very much, all of you, to being here. It's interesting that we are in Vienna. In Vienna reminds us that cities becomes engines of opportunity. Once you invest, when you have strong institutions, when you have long-term vision. And at the IDB, we had the opportunity to work directly with the city of Vienna and the Vienna University of Technology for nearly a decade. We had a partnership, and we were bringing professionals from Latin America to Vienna and the Caribbean to Vienna to experience and adapt lessons for the cities. So we're already doing these cities, and we're already doing partnership with this city here, Vienna. Cities for us are very important. They become tangible development. They're about people, jobs, housing, health, education, where people start their businesses. Well, they build their lives for better lives. So let me tell you that I'm going to talk today about how is our view on Latin America and the Caribbean cities, and how development is brought through the cities, and how we can enhance human capital for that. As some of you know, in Latin America and the Caribbean, 80% of the population lives. And the population is not a small population. We're talking about 670 million people, so 80% is a big chunk. And whether the region can generate growth, can generate inclusion, can generate opportunity, will depend largely on whether our cities can deliver. But to deliver, you need investment in infrastructure and services. You have to invest in institutions. You need to plan, deliver, adapt. By 2030, we estimate that we will require $4.3 trillion just annually in investment, about 5 times what we invest today in all the cities. So if we want to close the gap, we require strong local governments, better projects, more effective use, and of course, partnerships like the ones we are fostering here at this nice OPEC Fund forum. So at the IDB, let me tell you what we are doing to support. Last 5 years, we approved 36 housing and urban development operations totaling $5.7 billion through our public and private sector arms, IDB and IDB Invest and IDB Lab. We have supported investment in cities and worked with local governments across the regions. But Melinda mentioned something important. At the beginning of my mandate, they told me I need to go to the City Summit of the Americas. So Latin America, the Caribbean, but also the rest of the Americas. Canada, the US. That was in Denver, Colorado. And one of my first sessions was with the Latin American cities. And during these discussions, the mayor started to talk. And the local governments, and they were asking a lot of things. They say, we don't have direct access. You guys on the multilateral development, you're far. We don't access you. I mean, we have to talk to our federal government and all these issues. So I told them, look, let me think about it. I know it is an issue about guarantees, sovereign guarantees, federal, all of that. I'm going to think about how to do it. So I'm happy to say that after a few couple of months, if not years, we managed to get it. Our board approved the cities and regions in Latin America and Caribbean. It's still a pilot. We're talking about $1 billion. But that's enough for the first city was the Cartagena, was enough for San Jose to say they want to do it, to Panama City that they want to do. So we have the cities line up and they want to do it. So what is this program does? First, it gives direct financing without sovereign guarantees to specific cities that are in fiscal good condition. So we first look if they have fiscal good conditions, and then we can go in without the sovereign guarantee. If they don't have the fiscal good conditions, we provide capacity for them to change their fiscal accounts. So, second, in addition to capacity to fiscally, we provide capacity building in general. We work with the technical assistant to provide project preparation, because if they need to invest, somebody needs to do the project. And I have to tell you, not all the cities, not all our cities have the capacity to generate projects. So we have the project preparation through technical cooperation, which means that we provide the resources, the consultants for the project preparation. And last, cities and networks. So cities need to talk to each other. They have a lot of network. So we have 300 cities and 106 million people, basically secretaries of finance. That's the network. Finally, we are not being able to finance everything. So we help them access capital markets. And you may say, well, what is the city that accesses capital markets? Well, we help them. So we are supporting Panama City first bond for urban regeneration. So it can happen. If we are there, if we help the cities go out. So that's the project. Now, what else are we doing? Resilience. Resilience is a major issue for cities. Cities, regions, heartbeat and home to all of this GDP, we need to care about events. So our region faces 74 major events, climate events. They affect 7 million people, and they have caused just last year $10 billion of damage. So it is not a small penny for us to work in resilience for the cities and regions. This is the Ready and Resilient Americas. That's a program that we created. We launched in our annual meeting. It provides grants, non-reimbursable, for preparation. It provides a network of reaction. So that is something that, and of course, financing for resilience, all the financial instrument, the contingent instrument, if something happens, you can stop your payment for 2 years. If something happens, you can have an emergency loan. All of this is part of the resilience. Last but not least, cities need technology. We just cannot ignore that there is a technological boom. So we cannot treat cities here and technology boom there. So we are leveraging, for example, open source AI models. So our main goal now is for governments, local governments, cities, to be able to adopt in the best way, in the most efficient way, in the most equalitarian way, in the most fair way, AI technology. And that is something that will make a difference for our population, for our region, in Latin America and the Caribbean, and especially through the cities. So going forward, in order for us to do all of this, we need partnership. First, we need the cities to know what we're doing. Second, we need all the partnership with other MDBs, with the private sector, with the public sector, with governments, bilateral governments, that are the ones that provide our stakeholders, our shares, but also the ones that give us non-reimbursable resources for trust funds. So let me close saying that it's not only financing, although they ask me a lot, and we provide it, but we are about providing better lives. So the objective of cities is to create opportunities, expand productivity, and improve the lives of all the people. That is what we are all working here. So congratulations for everybody, and have a nice panel in the sequence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ilan Goldfein, for those words, also for sharing more about your very innovative program working with cities and regions, and for underlining the importance of resilience, because, of course, as we heard in the opening plenary, that is what this is all about, unlocking human potential, and cities have a lot of it. We just need to find those partnerships and those modalities that enable us to do the unlocking. So many thanks for that. And that is exactly what we now want to discuss with an absolutely outstanding panel of speakers. I will introduce them and ask them then to please come to the stage as I introduce you. Starting with Her Excellency Adeline Weinerman. She is serving her second term as Minister of Finance and Planning for Suriname. You can take this chair right there, if you would. She is navigating one of the region's most demanding fiscal environments while steering multiple programs designed to ensure funding and investment for cities and local communities. Great to have you with us. Thank you very much for being here. I'm very pleased to introduce Viviane Vecchi. She is Secretary for International Affairs and Development at Brazil's Ministry of Planning and Budget. She coordinates multiple partnerships, multilateral partnerships, and ensures alignment with institutions like IDB and the OPEC Fund on investment priorities for programs such as Novo PAC, the Brazilian federal initiative channeling over $100 billion into sustainable cities, housing, mobility, and social infrastructure. Great to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here. Daniel Best is president of the Caribbean Development Bank, which serves some of the world's most, welcome to you, right there, most climate-exposed, I don't need it, all right. Can I mention that you led the development of the bank's urban sector strategy policy? Can I do that? Okay. Thank you very much. It's great to have you with us, Daniel Best. And finally, it's a pleasure to welcome Sébastien Lahaye. He is vice chairman of the Sud Ameris Bank in Paraguay, a commercial banker who has built his institution's position by financing clients in corridors that other institutions have overlooked, including enterprises like urban SMEs and agribusiness corridors linking cities and farms. Welcome to you. Wonderful to have all of you with us. And we will now jump right into our interactive discussion. I'll just remind everybody we do have a rather compact window, so I'm very grateful for concise answers to my questions, and I'd like to start out with a first round that takes us into the reality on the ground, what's actually working and what is still holding progress back. And then later on, we will focus on the financing, architecture, and partnerships that can change that picture. So I'll ask Minister Weinemann to get us started with a case that illustrates what happens when the urban development agenda does collide with fiscal constraints and climate risk. And Paramaribo is home to 2/3 of Suriname's population, and it faces severe flood risk with annual damage that could reach $140 million by 2040, if I'm correct. You are simultaneously managing fiscal consolidation and a growing urban investment agenda. How do you balance these, and what financial instruments play an important role in trying to do that?
Yes, thank you very much. And again, thank you, and very good afternoon to everyone. And thank you for the opportunity to give some insight of Suriname. Now, let me say, Suriname, Paramaribo is our capital, and we are very proud to say that it is our heritage, it's a heritage site. The capital that also hosting the most important administrative and legislative administration from our country. And we were in the past, we always were proud to say we are not having that much disaster, climate disaster. But in the recent years, we are facing some challenging with climate change, flooding, and that seems to be increasing every time the weather is changing, it is increasing. So it is very important for us to see how to manage that. And yeah, it is a challenge. It is a challenge to maintain our fiscal consolidation, and giving the fact that we also have a national development plan and our goals to finance, to implement. And besides that, we have the climate change with the flooding, the disaster that has a great impact on our financial consolidations. So yeah, it is, and it remains a big challenge. Looking how to do that, every day now, in this season now, nowadays, we have in this recent months, and I think it will last till the 2 months, another 2 months, we have a lot of floodings, heavy floodings in Paramaribo, and also in the other interior and etc. And given the fact that we are also dealing with some macroeconomic situations, it is not that easy to finance the climate and see how to deal with that. But that's why, of course, we're looking to partner with other financial institutions to see how to deal with that. And so this forum is very important for us to discuss, and we are also glad that we can be a part of the F20 compact, so that we can see how to deal with it and learn from others that have more disasters. Like, for example, unfortunately, my CARICOM brothers and sisters, right, they have more disaster than we, but yeah, we can learn from that. But that's it for the year.
Thank you very much. Also underlined this morning by Mia Motley, saying, you know, one storm can wipe us out, and that vulnerability, so important. So we go now from one of the region's smallest economies to its largest, and a very different set of challenges, but a shared aim of maximizing the reach of urban infrastructure and services despite constraints on public resources. Secretary Vecchi, Brazil is, in fact, one of Latin America's most urbanized countries, with ambitious investment plans that span housing, transport, healthcare, and education. In the face of that constrained fiscal capacity, how are you ensuring those investments, in fact, reach the communities and cities that badly need them?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Hello. Thank you, Melinda, for the question. It's a pleasure for me to be here today, sharing our view from Brazil. Brazil has learned that urban development is most effective when investments are integrated rather than fragmented. Building a transport corridor alone is not enough. We need to connect mobility with housing, sanitation, education, and economic development. For that reason, it is important that investment decisions follow a more holistic and comprehensive development plan. And that's what we've been doing in Brazil. In Brazil, our investment strategy is guided by 2024-2027 multi-annual plan, our 10th multi-annual plan. This plan establishes 6 priority agendas focused on reducing inequalities, strengthening health and education, promoting sustainable economic development, tackling climate change and deforestation, and expanding infrastructure. These priorities are completed by 5 cross-cutting agendas, such as children and adolescents, women, indigenous people, racial equality, and the environment. Through our infrastructure program, Brazil is prioritizing investments based on social and infrastructure gaps, with a strong focus on underserved municipalities and vulnerable urban areas. This allows federal resources to be directed where they can have the greatest social and economic impact. It's important to mention that the federal government expects to have more than $260 billion in investments by the end of this year, including public and private investments. Partnership with multilateral development banks play a key role in the implementation of our Brazil's priority. They do not only provide long-term financing, but also bring technical expertise, project preparation, and institutional capacity. We have multiple examples of successful projects in Brazil financed by the MDBs. It's worth mentioning our Bolsa Família, our cash transfer program that reaches more than 20 million families. To ensure alignment between our national priorities and projects supported by MDBs, it is crucial to keep in mind Brazil's country strategy and our internal priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will come back to the topic of partnerships and alignment in our second round of discussion. But I think it's very significant, your emphasis also on integration and interconnectedness. It was quite interesting to hear President Al-Khalifa say during the opening that amongst the things that have changed in the last 50 years, that recognition of greater interconnectedness is absolutely crucial. And so thank you very much for bringing that to our attention once again. Going to Daniel Best now, and as Minister Weinerman's remarks reminded us, along with those of Mia Motley, Caribbean states do face a very distinctive set of challenges. Not only that climate risk that you mentioned, but also the persistent youth unemployment, and of course also this very limited fiscal space. So how does CDB approach unlocking human potential in that context? Where would you say are the most critical areas of investment that you see, the most important levers?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Melinda, and thank you to the OPEC Fund for having us here. I'd use as my point of departure what President Al-Khalifa spoke to in his opening remarks, at the beginning of his opening remarks, where he drew the reference of the bridge that was constructed, and the mother worrying, and the young girl now being able to get to school faster and more safer. I would posit respectfully that it is not just a bridge that was built, a physical piece of infrastructure, but what's being created there is an improvement in the life chances of that girl and so many other young people. And for that, I would then draw on the references of the Secretary and the Minister earlier. First, as it relates to the Caribbean, You mentioned, of course, the Prime Minister said one storm could significantly set us back. The challenge we face is that we're not experiencing one storm. We've had 5 Category 5 hurricanes over 8 years. That is 5 1-in-100-year events every other year for the last 8 years. And so, the hurricane season, Atlantic hurricane season started this month. And so every single Caribbean person in this room is looking to the skies and praying that this will not be the year that we are impacted. So let's move beyond that then. What is CDB focusing on? Well, our 3 strategic areas of focus are youth empowerment, institutional capacity development, and climate resilience. And you touched on the matter of youth. And let's bring it back to urban spaces when we're speaking about youth empowerment. Because cities of opportunities, urban spaces, we heard what Elan and IDB, what they're doing. It goes beyond physical infrastructure. It goes beyond engines of economic growth to a space where social and financial inclusivity has to be paramount, where youth and young people see, and people in general, see an opportunity to build livelihoods, but also see life chances. And so this is why we are seeking to invest in youth empowerment, because, the future of the Caribbean really is twofold. If we don't have infrastructure, if we can't survive this climate crisis, then what is our future? And if we don't have youth and young people empowered to build enterprise, to build businesses, to raise families, we have a troubling statistic in the region. Between 60 to 70% of our matriculated population, our population who have received tertiary education, are building economies outside of the Caribbean. So we're educating children from, when they enter school, 4 years all the way to 18, and then they leave, go to university, and don't return. And I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. I have 2 daughters who've done that. One has just returned last year, but the next is still living in London and working there. So we need to create those cities of opportunity that have the enabling environment that they want to return and build the Caribbean. That is why we focus on youth empowerment, because youth empowerment is about the future of the region, not just physically, but socially, and it speaks to inclusivity. And I'll end with this. When we speak about inclusivity in the region and cities of opportunity, the importance of this partnership with OPEC Fund, the importance of this partnership with CAF, with the Arab Coordination Group, we need data. And one of the challenges we lack in the region is sufficient data. And we can't preach inclusivity without knowing who is being excluded and why. If not, it just becomes a talk shop and another photo op. And I've had my photo taken way too many times. It's time to actually deliver on stuff. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for underlining that. Very important point. Digital connectivity is a theme here at this year's forum, so important to note that as well. Let's go now to a commercial banking perspective, because mobilizing private capital and engagement is clearly absolutely crucial when public funds and ODA fall short of what's needed. So, Mr. Lahai, Paraguay's cities and agribusiness corridors are generating a lot of economic momentum, yet SMEs and smaller enterprises continue to face obstacles in accessing long-term affordable finance. As I mentioned, Sudameris has shown willingness to work with borrowers that other lenders might consider too risky. What has that taught you about what urban and rural enterprises in Paraguay actually need from their bank, and what is holding them back?
Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation. I appreciate being such a distinguished panel. Just a few numbers about Paraguay, I think, to put things into context. Paraguay is the size of California. There's 4 cities 6.5 million people, and 80% of those 6.5 million people live in those 4 cities. So it's a big empty farm, basically, which creates the challenge of how do you connect those cities? How do you make sure that people stay in the countryside if they can? Yeah. When I arrived in Paraguay 22 years ago, one thing that struck me was I don't see any towers. There is no real estate development. So one of my clients said, well, how many cranes do you think there are in Paraguay? I said, I don't know. And he said, there are 2 cranes. That was 2004. And how many concrete mixers do you think there are? 6. So to develop the country, all the companies were relying on short-term funding and basically financing infrastructure investment, industrial investments with working capital. So one of the key challenges for a private bank is to try to align the funding with the actual requirements and to make sure that we provide what the client really needs, which is to save his working capital for the operations and have investment money for the long-term projects that they have in mind. So one of our key focus in the last 20 years has been to do that, to try and to see what exactly do you need and restructure the financing of the companies so that their balance sheet actually ties up and they don't use short-term money to build a new industry. The second aspect is I think we can also help companies stay outside of the cities if there is an opportunity for a new industry, a new economic sector. One example in Paraguay that is really taking off right now, which is anything around reforestry. Paraguay has been known so far for grains and meat, but some people have realized that you actually can grow trees as well. And they look at the example of what Uruguay has done over the last 35, 40 years in their forestry and paper pulp industry. And we've basically started this right during COVID and in areas that are outside of the cities. So by financing projects or reforestation, you have a domino effect of all the different industries that rely on trees, not just for the paper pulp, but it goes from wood products, obviously, to manufacturing furniture, to even SAF, and so on. So by providing long-term funding to new industries, especially reforestation, we believe that this is a sector in specific for Paraguay that represents 15% of GDP in the next 15 years. So that will help also keep people outside of the cities, but also develop economic centers that are today very small. The birthplace of reforestation in Paraguay is a traditionally forgotten area of Paraguay in the north of the country. And that place is seeing a 6-fold development in terms of people moving there, with, again, a domino effect that creates issues around education, healthcare, infrastructure, water treatment, and so on and so forth. But it's also an opportunity.
Thank you very much also for underlining that when we talk about unlocking human potentials, we're also talking about managed urban development, including that important link between cities and the regions surrounding them. Because, again, if that gets out of balance, then the cities themselves are strained even more. So very important point that you made there. I'd like to go now to a second round of discussion and really take a deeper dive on financial instruments and partnerships. All of you have mentioned the importance of these. Let's go into more detail now. And again, I'll start with Mr. Wennerman. And an example that I also was thinking about when we were listening to Mia Motley this morning. Suriname recently adopted an initiative that is really striking in its simplicity. Your government issued a social bond earmarked for healthcare, education, youth, agriculture, and the housing fund, some of those areas exactly the ones that Mia Motley mentioned this morning, using capital markets to finance the social agenda directly. Some years ago, that would have been considered more or less impossible. So tell us a little bit about how you did that, what results you've seen, and what you've learned about how small states can access international capital for human development itself.
Thank you very much. Yes, of course. Let me start by saying that when we, as administration, a new administration, because as the fact, July 60 will be our 1 year anniversary as new administration, We were aware that for us it was very important to improve the living condition of our people. So we're looking into the area you mentioned, the education. We were aware that having healthy people, well-educated people, giving them a good housing to stay was very important. So the social agenda was crucial, and we were given the opportunity to issue a bond. So we did it. We started first with issuing bonds to restructuring a bond we already had. And on a part of that, we were given the opportunity to do a modest social bond, as we call it, and mainly to finance those areas that were very important for us as a new administration. It was what I learned in this transaction during this period is that the financial institution, the capital market investors, sometimes you think they only looking at the return of investment, but what is very important, I think, the macroeconomic environment you present to them, the prospect we have as of Suriname, we are heading to hopefully after some years a good economic situation with gas and oil. I think that is they played a very important role. And besides that, the social agenda, that was very attractive also for the investors. And a very important thing also, the trust. I think the trust we managed to earn by those investors was also one of the things that gave us the opportunity to issue this bond. Besides that, so Suriname is one of the few countries with a carbon negative status. And of course, we are willing to maintain that status. And that is one of the things, besides the oil and gas development, we had to, at the other side, we also want to maintain our carbon credit status. Those were the facts, the facts that played a very crucial role in issuing these bonds. They were very interesting to see that Suriname want to come out of the recent year difficult situation. Of course, after also a difficult IMF program, we were willing to go further. So the experience I have with the investors, they were very interesting in what Suriname want to do with the social area and what they want to do on our macroeconomic situation, as I already mentioned. So those were that is what my experience was. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. That is, I think, an example that can make all of us optimistic about the next 50 years if we see what has become possible. Secretary Vecchi, I'd like to come back to the topics of integration and alignment that you touched on briefly in your first answer. In fact, Brazil has been deepening partnerships with multilateral institutions on infrastructure, on social services, and on climate resilience. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about what financing approaches and instruments you feel are proving most effective in those areas, but also what you would ask of development partners in terms of better aligning their programs with your priorities.
Thank you. Investment needs have become more complex. Brazil's experience has shown that no single investment instrument is enough to address all the challenges. I will point out three main approaches that we've been using in Brazil. First, guaranteed instruments. Traditional sovereign loans are essential for financing large-scale infrastructure and social investment. At the same time, guaranteeing instruments are becoming increasingly important because they provide bankability of projects and can mobilize more private capital. A good example that we have in Brazil is the first IDB's guarantee operation for public-private partnership. It was approved to support the expansion of a big regional hospital. And the IDB is providing an $80 million guarantee that strengthens PPP's financial viability and attracts private investment. This operation illustrates how innovative risk-sharing instruments can leverage private capital to deliver public infrastructure that we need. Second, blended finance has also become an important tool, particularly for projects whose social and environmental returns exceed their immediate financial returns. The Amazon Forever Finance Facility for Cities and Resilience Infrastructure is an excellent example. Launched by the IDB Group in partnership with the Amazon Cities Country Group. The initiative seeks to mobilize more than $1 billion for investment in modern sanitation, resilient urban infrastructure, clean energy, and sustainable mobility. Finally, technical assistance and project preparation are equally important, particularly for smaller municipalities that often lack the institutional capacity to develop bankable projects. Looking ahead, we believe the challenge is no longer simply to mobilize more financing, but to deploy a broader range of financial instruments.
Thank you very much. And when you talk about the smaller municipalities, I immediately thought of President Goldfein's remarks on saying, you know, we look first at the city's credit rating, essentially, at, you know, their economic situation. But that's not a cutoff. What we do after that is we look at where we could help improve capacity. And clearly, that's crucial also in the example that you just mentioned. Mr. Best, you have said elsewhere that citizens don't experience strategies, they experience results. And what many Caribbean cities and towns continue to experience at the moment is persistent gaps in services, in opportunity, in infrastructure, as you mentioned, also especially for young people. What shift in development finance, in the way that it's structured, deployed, and partnered, would be most critical to ensure that those instruments actually do deliver results that show up in people's lives?
Yeah, thanks. And you know, as I'm about to answer that question about the shift in development finance, I'm acutely aware that I think as I count, I have 6 governors. I'm my chief financial officer in the room, so I'm going to be very cautious because they'll hold me to it. But seriously, we need to finance results that people can see and feel. That's it. I mean, you know, we don't need to overcomplicate it. People don't see and feel strategic plans. But, you know, we are very proud of the fact that our 10-year strategic plan was approved in February of this year. We're very proud of the fact that we got our work program and budget approved. We're very proud of the MOPAN assessment. But how many people outside or even inside this room know what MOPAN means or even care, right? People don't see and feel these things that we think are so important. They see and feel actual impacts on their lives and their children's lives. So let me begin. The first thing is we need more community-centered development, design, and implemented projects. We can no longer continue to do development for communities or for people. We need to do development with them. They need to be in at the ground stage. They need to be in at the design stage and all through the implementation process. The day has long gone where Bretton Woods institutions such as ours are absolutely convinced that we have better answers than the people living in communities. And so you just be grateful that we are here now and we are delivering these solutions to you. Yeah. That window has closed. We need to bring those people in all through the process. Absolutely, we may have the scientific knowledge, but they have the actual lived experiences. And there's a marriage there that can only redound to the benefit of the long-term benefit of these people. The second, I would say, is more flexible and risk-focused financing tools. So you heard the Prime Minister spoke about what I believe would be the third pillar of V2V, which is speaking to shock responses, right? So the SRCs, right, the debt service response clauses, right?
Should we remind everyone V2V, vulnerability to viability?
Vulnerability to viability,
Yeah,
sorry.
just
That's
in
the other
case
thing
you
we do a
weren't-
lot
yeah.
in development, speaking acronyms, I'm sorry. Vulnerability to vulnerability to viability. But also the debt service suspension clauses. That's another one. But there's also the contingent emergency response clauses, or CERCs, wherein they need to be built in at the outset. Yeah. Thereby, when a disaster strikes, they immediately trigger a condition that allows the country to reallocate already approved resources. Because attempting to go through another MDB appraisal process to get financing for this project, because this community it has been impacted, is not only onerous, it is wrong. It is wrong. And so building CERCs, and that is one of the things my CFO and the team are actually working on now, to build CERCs in to our contracts, because we know these disasters are coming. So I think it is these flexibilities. And finally, this all speaks to the fact that order is shrinking. We know this. This isn't news, right? Official development assistance, concessional resources. So we need to be innovative in how we finance. So what have we started entering into? More debt for resilience swaps. More, and we are actually working on, you heard the Prime Minister mention it earlier, working on the first multi-guarantor debt for resilience, or debt, in this case, debt for social swaps together with IDB, CAF, and the World Bank. Why is that important? It is important because by providing lower cost debt, countries can take that saving and target it towards sustainable development outcomes. These are the kind of innovative solutions that we are called to do. So that shift in how we as MDBs and how the global financing community respond, we don't need to overthink this. We need to finance results, people, real people, not in this room, but for whom we are speaking for right now, people can see and feel.
Thank you very much. For real people under realistic circumstances, because clearly volatility, risk, uncertainty, crises, they're now the new normal. And so therefore your point on CERCs, I think, is especially interesting. One of the other developments of recent decades, of course, has been South-South cooperation. So let's hear one final thought about how that opens new doors for unlocking human potential. And the OPEC Fund's syndicated facility for Pseudomeris drew in partners from the Gulf alongside other development financiers, opening Paraguay to new pools of international capital. So, Mr. Lahai, maybe you can talk to us about what that has meant for Paraguay and how you see this model evolving. What would be your message to other countries with ambitious urban development goals in regard to the impact of development finance institutions that facilitate access to new sources of capital?
Thank you. Just one point. I mean, what you just said resonates a lot about how many bridges to nowhere have been built because nobody asked the question to the local communities. And with scarce resources, I think it's more and more critical to make sure that we're actually really sure that that deployed capital makes sense. Just a side note. When it comes to development funding for a country like Paraguay is basically critical. There is no Paraguay as it is today without DFIs. To put things into perspective, 2004 GDP of the country was $6.5 billion. Today we're $45 billion. So we're talking about over 6 times, 7 times GDP. And why? Because average maturities on banks' balance sheet on deposit side in 2005 were about 4.5 months. So obviously, if you need to finance an infrastructure project, you know, your deposit are not going to help because you're not going to commit that money for 15 years. So that's where DFI, multilateral, and other sources of development funding come into play. And thanks to that, we've been able to create a real estate business. We've been able to create infrastructure, roads, connectivity, to develop the grid, which is an essential part of any development plan. So for us, expanding the horizon is also critical because there's that much that we can ask to our friends from the OPEC fund or from the IDB. Even though they've been instrumental, they have limited resources. So the more we present the opportunities of what their impact dollar can have in Paraguay, the better it is for them, for us, but above all for the local community. So I will keep being a traveler and telling the story of Paraguay because I think the impact that every dollar can have is very easily measurable in our communities when you have smaller countries. Maybe not that much in Brazil, which is much further ahead, but in our communities, a $100 million loan can explain very easily the impact that it has. We can show, you can talk to the communities, and it's very moving to see what that means to these people. You know, being a new bridge, being a new grid, being wells for water. So this is paramount. Without long-term money, especially in countries where conceptually all these should be financed by pension funds. And I was feeling very touched by the president of Sao Tome because I was thinking with the population size that he has, what is the size of his pension fund to actually use and tap to finance infrastructure with 30-year money? And that's probably zero. So without DFIs, countries like these have no chance to develop their infrastructure until your prime minister convinces people to land at 70, 80, 100 years. And one final point, maybe, which I find very critical, you have natural crises, but you also have a very important, in my opinion, crisis coming up, which is energy crisis, which is accelerated by AI. We all think about jobs, but AI is such an energy consumer that is looking for what in 10, 12 years ago, crypto were looking, which was where can I go in a non-regulated, cheap energy place, tap, and then move away. Yeah. AI is sort of trying to do the same today, if not exactly the same, with zero impact in our communities, but with consumption of electricity that are astronomical, and without them contributing to the grid or the energy generation solution, this is going to be a very short-term major drama.
Thank you very much. I wish we had another half hour to zoom in on that point, but I'm afraid we are out of time. We will touch briefly on it in session 4 later on, but it's worthy of an entire day's discussion on its own. Let me just try briefly to tie together the strands of what we've heard from all of you this morning. And I think I see something of a consensus that I'd like to spotlight. Basically, whether we're talking about Suriname's social bond, Brazil's partnership architecture, CDB's focus on finance that actually shows up in people's lives, or Paraguay, Sudamer's work in Paraguay's underserved agribusiness corridors, and also, of course, with urban SMEs. It seems to me you are telling us that the ambition is real and it's urgent, and you're also telling us the capital is there, the instruments exist. And what I kept hearing again and again is how crucial it is now to ensure integration and alignment. And when I say alignment, I mean, of course, between national and subnational governments, including local communities, between public and private finance, between development institutional mandates, and also looking always at the actual needs of those on the ground, as we say, of those who are vulnerable. All of you have underlined that in a way that I think has been very moving. And that alignment doesn't happen automatically. It requires institutions that are willing to listen and adapt. It requires partners who are willing to take on risk. that markets won't necessarily price, and that is also in a new category of risk. And it requires governments with the policy frameworks and fiscal credibility, or at least will, to follow through in shaping action on the ground. And I think what we have heard is that this is not easy, but it is possible. So I would like to thank all of you for making that point to us and for sharing your perspectives and your insights. Let's give them another warm round of applause, please. And we now take an hour break for lunch. At least I think it'll be about an hour break. And then we will reconvene here in the Hofburg Gallery for a session that picks up on the related theme of financing next generation infrastructure. And for that, we're going to be going to Asia. So hopefully some of you will return for that. And I wish you bon appétit and an enjoyable rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much.